Okay, and let me just put. I'm gonna put back up the shout outs because I cleared the chat. Okay, I just put those up. It's Campbell who does the music for the stream. He's live on Twitch as Complicated every Saturday, 3:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, 4:30 Eastern. And for anyone who wants to send any voice messages to the stream, I now have a place where you can send those anonymously if you want, or you can just say your name in it if you want to. And it's speakpipe.com/imagination. All right, let's get into it. So this is lesson 4. If you are interested in, if this may be the first one you're listening to because you have an interest in the source material of self-concept, the rest of the lessons are great. Neville's 5 lessons is really the foundational teachings. You can read just that and know everything you need to know. You don't need to read the books or listen to any more lectures, though. You always want to have reminders because all this is reminders to yourself from yourself. But this is the foundational self-concept teachings. This is lesson 4, no one to change but self. May I take just a minute to clarify what was said last night? He's referencing what would have been lesson 3. A lady felt from what I said last night that I am anti-one nation. I do hope. Oh, also, let me put up before I go ahead. 5. So the 5 lessons are. Let me make this a little bigger. The 5 lessons are available for free online. I need to move some things so everything fits here. They're available for free online at archive.org. You could also probably find them some other places, but that's what I'm using to read these out. Is I'm on archive.org, just looking at it there. Let me scoot this up. All right. May I take just a minute to clarify what was said last night? A lady felt from what I said last night that I am anti-one nation. I do hope that I am not anti any nation, race, or belief. If perchance I used a nation, it was only to illustrate a point. What I tried to tell you was this: we become what we contemplate, for it is the nature of love as it is the nature of hate, to change us into the likeness of that which we contemplate. Last night I simply read a news item to show you that when we think we can destroy our image by breaking the mirror, we are only fooling ourselves. When, through war or revolution, we destroy titles which to us represent arrogance and greed, we become in time the embodiment of that which we thought we had destroyed. So today the people who thought they destroyed the tyrants are themselves that which they thought they had destroyed. That I may not be understood, let me again lay the foundation of this principle. Consciousness is the one and only reality. We are incapable of seeing other than the contents of our own consciousness. Therefore, hate betrays us in the hour of victory and condemns us to be that which we condemn. All conquest results in an exchange of characteristics, so that conquerors become like the conquered foe. We hate others for the evil which is in ourselves. Races, nations, and religious groups have lived for centuries in intimate hostility, and it is the nature of hatred, as it is the nature of love, to change us into the likeness of that which we contemplate. Nations act toward other nations as their own citizens act toward each other. When slavery exists in a state and that nation attacks another, it is with intent to enslave. When there is a fierce economic competition between citizen and citizen, then in war with another nation, the object of the war is to destroy the trade of the enemy. Wars of domination are brought about by the will of those who, within a state, are dominant over the fortunes of the rest. We radiate the world that surrounds us by the intensity of our imagination and feeling. But in this third dimensional world of ours, time beats slowly. And so we do not always observe the relationship of the visible world to our inner nature. Now, that is what I really meant. I thought I had said it, that I may not be misunderstood. That is my principle. You and I can contemplate an ideal and become it by falling in love with it. On the other hand, we can contemplate something we heartily dislike, and by condemning it, we will become it. But because of the slowness of time in this three-dimensional world, when we do become what we contemplated, we had forgotten that formerly we set out to worship or destroy it. To simplify what Neville is saying there, because you have the infinite might and power of God, things will appear in your world simply based on your focus upon them. So if you don't want war, you can't sit there thinking about how awful the war is. You have to instead place your focus, your attention, your infinite power on the feeling of peace, on the idea of peace, on what if this was a totally peaceful situation. The more you engage with unwanted, the more you perpetuate it. And this is one of the things, like when Neville says in the Order Your Conversations Aright lecture, he was referencing the Merchant of Venice. It's easier to teach 20 people than it would be to follow my own instructions. So I know how difficult it can be to move away from unwanted, especially when it's something very pressing, to instead focus on your preference. But the more you contemplate and think about what you don't want, the more you're going to experience it. It's just that simple. He also might have been referencing, though it's been a while since I looked at the third lesson, he also might have just been talking about, because he talks a lot of times like you are not your, your heritage, like the people, your parents, you're not your race, you're not your religious background or your nationality. And one time he's being very flippant about it. He's like, what do you mean my background? I'm not a horse. I don't have a background. My only background is being God. That's the point that he's trying to make. It's like, these are little limitations we place upon ourselves, little ways we carve our identity, but they're limitations upon your consciousness. And that's why you experience certain things. And the more you do that and play that game, the more you're going to experience that reality. So the more, in changing the feeling of I, he talked directly about a man who had spoke to him either after or before a meeting, who really felt into the limitations of being black and had that reflected in his reality. And when Neville met him, he told him, well, why? There's nothing wrong with you. There's no reason that people should treat you as less than because of your appearance, because of the color of your skin. And so once that man adjusted that, and according to Neville, it was 3 years later that he was told his success and shown, this physically shown where the guy had his office. This guy became majorly successful, had a business, I think it was in Manhattan. If you want to hear that experience, read, or I did the lecture, Changing the Feeling of I, check it out on my YouTube, or just look up the lecture. Now I realize in our current mindset, the way a lot of movements are framing things is from the sleeping perspective. So from the sleeping perspective, we are only going to dispel injustice by talking about the injustice. However, that focus on it keeps it alive in your world. You should only be so critically focused on the battle if what you want is a battle. If you really wanted it to be the ideal, you would focus only upon the ideal. And in a personal level, if you really wanted to be treated, like if you say you're someone who part of your identity is being a minority and being mistreated because of being that minority, instead of focusing on that mistreatment and considering it inevitable, assuming it for yourself, you would instead focus on being treated equally, always being treated with respect. Everybody having a reverence towards you that they have towards anybody else. It's simply this contemplation and assumption about people are going to hate you or dislike you or not accept you that causes it to be your experience. And I recognize fully how controversial that statement is, because it sounds like what would be called victim blaming. But it is the way this reality is operating. And I mean, really, if anybody has a problem with me saying that, it's simply my assumption that they will have a problem with that. There's a really good James Booker quote. I don't want to misquote it, but if you look up like James Booker quote about hate, you'll find it. And it's basically that our sort of our anger comes from an inability to and a valid inability to recognize how much pain is actually there. And when it comes to these larger injustices that many people have experienced, that's certainly the case, because it seems wrong to want to let go of that anger. And I know certainly everybody watching this has had an experience where you can relate that personally. Maybe it may not have been discrimination, but some other sort of problem you had in a relationship where to let go of that anger is just not something you can do in the current state you're in, because the pain that anger is masking is a little bit too intense. You don't want to experience it. And based on how you view the situation, it doesn't feel right to let go of it, but letting go of it is the only way to actually remove it from your consciousness, remove it from your reality, to instead focus on the love and harmony, joy and togetherness and unity that is really there. All right, a bit of a rant. But if someone wants to discuss that at a more advanced level in a future stream, you go ahead and either email me at imaginationstream@gmail, or send me a speak on the speak pipe. It's actually something that Daphne and I might talk about, because of a lot of her interests are on the stuff in the news and legislation, specifically in America, and kind of my position and point to her is it's the wrong focus. Like, focusing on this specific piece of legislation is the wrong thing. You should be focused on the heaven within you, and then all of that stuff will automatically sort itself out. And that's kind of that's the topic of today's lesson. Tonight's lesson is the capstone of the Bible, so do give me your attention. The most important question asked in the Bible will be found in the 16th chapter of the Gospel of St. Matthew. As you know, all of the Bible stories are your stories. Its characters live only in the mind of man. They have no reference at all to any person who lived in time and space, or to any event that ever occurred upon earth. This is very important for anyone who dared to have the incorrect notion that this is somehow a religious stream. Neville's view of the Bible is that it is simply your autobiography. It is a psychodrama that you wrote for yourself as a journal that you could reference as you please or when you needed. So everything in the Bible is something that is happening in your mind. The characters of the Bible are states, mindsets that you have experienced or will experience. All of the plots in there are either unfoldings that happen to you physically or within your mind. None of it is a true story in the sense that those people were alive outside of a state within you. However, being that everything is imaginal, there's really no difference between something that happens and something that doesn't happen, because in the realm of imagination is the only place where things actually are alive. Here, everything is dead and you're just animating it. But the Bible tells you about some of the movements of all of the movements of mind you will go through, and their subsequent possible animations. That's the point of the Bible. It's not a moral guide. It's just reminders to yourself about why you're going through all this crap, you know, and some direction on how to improve it if you so choose. The drama related to Matthew takes place in this manner. Jesus turns to his disciples and asks them, "Whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am?" And they said, "Some say thou art John the Baptist, some Elias, and some others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." He saith unto them, "But whom say ye that I am? Who do you say I am?" And Simon Peter answered and said, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered and said unto him, "Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven. And I say also unto thee that thou art Peter, upon this rock I will build my church." Jesus turning to his disciples is man, turning to his disciplined mind in self-contemplation. You ask yourself the question, "Whom do men say that I am?" In our language, "I wonder what men think of me." You answer, "Some say John come again, some say Elias, others say Jeremiah, and still others a prophet of old come again." It's very flattering to be told that you resemble the great men of the past, but enlightened reason is not enslaved by public opinion. It is only concerned with the truth. So it asks itself another question. But whom say ye that I am? In other words, who am I? If I am bold enough to assume that I am Christ Jesus, the answer will come again, "Thou art Christ Jesus." When I assume it and feel it and boldly live it, I will say to myself, "Flesh and blood could not have told me this, but my Father which is in heaven revealed it unto me." Then I make this concept of self the rock on which I establish my church, my world. If you believe not that I am he, you shall die in your sins. So when Neville talks here, when he's talking about Christ Jesus here, the Son of God, he is saying essentially, you, your personal self, are the manifestation of this infinite God power. You are its manifestation, and you are a force which can apply it however you please. The disciples, and I think Neville did just clearly tell you this, the disciples or apostles are all symbols of the aspect of mind that you need to discipline, that you need to call into practice in order to best utilize your infinite power, which is your imagination. So basically, the point of this little thing here is that you're not any of the states. So if we ask the three people who know you best, what do they think about you? They might have a whole little paragraph of nice things to say. And you ask them, well, no, really, what do you think about them? They might, include some characteristics about you that are less than pleasant, and maybe you like them, maybe you don't. But none of that's who you really are. Who you really are is equivalent to this infinite imaginal power. And you're the representation of this infinite power, which can transform itself and be molded into the shape of whatever you apply your thought towards. So however those people would describe you right now, that's not who you really are. Who you really are is imagination itself, and your current self is the embodiment of all the things you've thought up until this point. That is the point of this story. Because consciousness is the only reality, I must assume that I am already that which I desire to be. If I do not believe that I am already what I want to be, then I remain as I am and die in this limitation. Man is always looking for some prop on which to lean. He is always looking for some excuse to justify failure. This revelation gives man no excuse for failure. His concept of himself is the cause of all the circumstances of his life. All changes must first come from within himself. I'm going to clear the messages. I guess I'll just turn chat box off. This revelation gives man no excuse for failure. His concept of himself is the cause of all the circumstances of his life. All changes must first come from within himself, and if he does not change on the outside, it is because he has not changed within. But man does not like to feel that he is solely responsible for the conditions of his life. From that time, many of his disciples went back and walked no more with him. Then said Jesus unto the 12, Will ye also go away? Then Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? Thou hast the words of eternal life. In other words, they went back to their old beliefs. When they heard that they were the only ones causing their... So in other words, when you tell someone you're the reason all this crap is in your life, if they don't like that, for good reason they don't like that, they'll go back to whatever their belief system was before, even if their belief system was totally irreligious. It was religious in the sense that it was devoutly atheist. That's because they don't want to confront that they have done all these things which displease them. And then these disciples, which could also be not just aspects of mind, but people you know who are also applying the law, they're going to keep talking to you because they know the law works. They know this is true. And even when they have something happen to them that they don't understand, is really horrible, they still understand that it's all being animated by imagination. And in the end, eternal love, infinite joy is yours no matter what. So it doesn't necessarily trouble them if they have a really crappy unfolding, or if something unexpected and horrible just kind of happens. They know they can always lean on the law, and they know that they're going to receive the promise. So it's not really a big deal if, whatever you're going through right now, it's not really a big deal when you consider that you're infinite and eternal. You're just imagining yourself to be a person with this problem. I may not like what I have just heard, that I must turn to my own consciousness as the only reality, the only foundation on which all phenomena can be explained. It was easier living when I could blame another. This is the reason why a lot of people will use the law for a couple things and want to abdicate responsibility for basically all the rest. It's the most common reason why people never buy the pearls, because they say, well, I want to get the things I want, but I don't believe I'm responsible for all this awful stuff that I could read in the news. I definitely don't want to, have that be an additional burden upon me in terms of my imaginal acts. Or, I'm just going to imagine for myself. I don't want to imagine for other people, which the reason we've got the Are You Feeding Your Pig, I've got the little Are You Feeding Your Pig graphic on there, is to remind you that the way to truly awaken your imagination and give you much more intense control over your exterior reality is by imagining for others, and therefore understanding even better that there are no others, that it's all a continuous unified body of God. The other reason too I played that little clip today is because there was an example of when Neville imagined for someone else in the same way he would imagine for himself, and that is something that we should all be doing. It was much easier living when I could blame society for my ills, or point a finger across the sea and blame another nation. It was easier living when I could blame the weather for the way I feel. But to tell me that I am the cause of all that happens to me, that I am forever molding my world in harmony with my inner nature, that is more than man is willing to accept. If this is true, to whom would I go? If these are the words of eternal life, I must return to them, even though they seem so difficult to digest. When man fully understands this, he knows that public opinion does not matter. For men only tell him who he is, his current manifestations. The behavior of men constantly tell me who I have conceived myself to be. If I accept this challenge and begin to live by it, I finally reach the point that is called the Great Prayer of the Bible. It is related in the 17th chapter of the Gospel of St. John. I have finished the work which thou gavest me to do. And now, O Father, glorify thou me with thine own self, with the glory which I had with thee before the world was. While I was with them in the world, I kept them in thy name. Thou that gavest me I have kept, and none of them is lost but the son of perdition. It is impossible for anything to be lost. In this divine economy, nothing can be lost. It cannot even pass away. The little flower which has bloomed once blooms forever. It is invisible to you here with your limited focus. but it blooms forever in the larger dimension of your being, and tomorrow you will encounter it. Here, Neville is talking about he is talking about the overall arrangement of how we experience this temporary reality. Like even the idea of it being temporary is something we're animating. So in this infinite eternal storehouse of imagination, you can right now imagine a pink rose in full bloom. And though it is not present in your physical reality, if you strongly identify, if you really distinctly imagine this pink rose bloomed, so much so that you move it into this space, you will at some point encounter a blooming pink rose. So that's the idea. It's like it's all contained within you. You can access it all through imagination, and it's your strong contemplation and identification with it that moves it into this realm of experience. And supposedly the thing that we're here learning to do is how to not just select things but deselect things, like deselect unwanted things, and to decide if they're things that we want to use, like as colors the next time we create. All that thou gavest me I have kept in thy name, and none have I lost save the son of perdition. The son of perdition simply means the belief in loss. Son is a concept and idea. Perdido is loss. I have only truly lost the concept of loss, for nothing can be lost. I can descend from the sphere where the thing itself now lives, and as I descend in consciousness to a lower level within myself, it passes from my world. I say, I have lost my health, I have lost my wealth, I have lost my standing in the community, I have lost faith, I have lost 1,000 things. But the things in themselves, having once been real in my world, can never cease to be. They never become unreal with the passage of time. I, by my descent in consciousness to a lower level, cause these things to disappear from my sight, and I say, they have gone. They are finished as far as my world goes. All I need to do is to ascend to the level where they are eternal, and they once more objectify themselves and appear as realities within my world. In other words, imagine it. Imagine it and identify with having that experience. So let's say it was a certain amount of money you lost. Imagine you have that equivalent amount of money now. A physical object, put it in your hand. If you lost a physical object, put it in your hand. If you feel a relationship deteriorated and you haven't had contact with the person for a while, you would desire that. Imagine you're talking to them now and that relationship is restored or better. The idea is that you can't truly lose something. Now, there is this mystery of death that we encounter. However, Neville is playing, and I have had a dream about it. Everything here is already dead. So that to me makes the mystery of death even more complicated. But yeah, this idea that in imagination everything is eternal, so you simply extract it from there and pop it out here. You take that sort of pre-recorded amount of film and put it in the projector, and then it displays itself. I, by my descent in consciousness to a lower level, cause these things, or okay, I'm reading here, but that's okay. I, by my descent in consciousness to a lower level, cause these things to disappear from my sight, and I say they have gone. They are finished as far as my world goes. All I need to do is to ascend to the level where they are eternal, and they once more objectify themselves and appear as realities within my world. The crux of the whole 17th chapter of the Gospel of St. John is found in the 17th verse. And for their sake I sanctify myself, that they also might be sanctified through truth. Heretofore I thought I could change others through effort. Now I know I cannot change another unless I first change myself. To change another within my world, I must first change my concept of that other, and to do it best, I change my concept of self. For it was the concept of self I held that made me see others as I did. Had I a noble, dignified concept of myself, I never could have seen the unlovely in others. Instead of trying to change others through argument and force, let me but ascend in consciousness to a higher level, and I will automatically change others by changing self. There is no one to change but self. That self is simply your awareness, your consciousness, and the world in which it lives is determined by the concept you hold of self. It is to consciousness that we must turn as the only reality, for there is no clear conception of the origin of phenomena except that consciousness is all, and all is consciousness. I'll make a stream mark because I think this is a really great for anybody who is interested in the idea of experiencing a person in a different way. The way a lot of LA people are talking about it. If there's a specific person manifestation you want to have, but you want certain characteristics about them to be different, here is your best advice. Here is the source of all of that advice that people are giving you related to that. To change another within my world, I must first change my concept of that other, and to do it best, I change my concept of self. So if you were someone who experienced, let's go with a sort of primary relationship type configuration, whether that was a romantic partner or a best friend or even a business partner or a parent, whatever. If you experience the person choosing other activities, people, just they chose other things over you. If you wanted to spend the day with them and they're like, no, I'm going to go hang out with my friends instead, or oh, I just want to sleep today, or whatever reason they gave you, that was only happening because you assumed that they would choose other things over you, because you had this self-concept of being second best in some way, of not being someone's, favorite person to be with, their top priority, whatever. You had this self-concept of not being prioritized, and it was reflected in this relationship. And if you're honest with yourself, you will know that you were doing that. And, let's say it might have been specific to certain areas of your life. So let's say in business, you always know that business partners are eager to work with you. You have a great, thriving business, but you don't necessarily feel that way in romantic relationships. You feel that, there are other people that they're dating that they might like more than me. And so that assumption showed up in your world. Or, it can even be more specific down to, if you look at your friends, this friend, if you want to hang out and they have free time, or even if they don't have free time, if they got to squeeze you into all the stuff they want to do that day, this person will always do something with you. They will always come hang out with you if you want. But this other person, you have the concept that, well, they're really busy. It's very rare they can make time for me. So even if it's the same activity, and these two friends like doing the activity with you the same amount, the friend who will always, come hang out with you will, and the friend who they're usually busy probably won't. So these assumptions can be very specific. But this overall core feeling of being someone that other people want to spend time with is paramount. And if you have so descended to the point where, why would anybody want to spend time with me type of state, that's going to be reflected in all of your relationships. Or, if you want to, these ideas of, well, what do I have to offer type of thing. Instead of thinking, I'm awesome, people love spending time with me, why wouldn't they? I'm so much fun. Of course people love hanging out with me. That will be reflected in your world. Those body of thoughts, those body of beliefs about who you are will be automatically reflected. Okay, on that note, I'm going to take another quick break. We're not going to get through as much of this as I thought we were tonight, but we'll get through enough of it. I'll be right back. Okay. You need, and we're starting again right here. You need no helper to bring what you seek. Do not for 1 second believe that I am advocating escape from reality when I ask you to simply assume you are now the man or the lady that you want to be. If you and I could feel what it would be like, were we now that which we want to be, and live in this mental atmosphere as though it were real, then in a way we do not know, our assumption would harden into fact. This is all we need to do in order to ascend to the level where our assumption is already an objective, concrete reality. I mean, you can't read this enough. My point earlier today when I was talking about the techniques, why do you need a technique? However you move into that mental atmosphere is totally fine. You don't need a prescribed technique to do it. If you can move now without any visualization, affirmation, writing it down, whatever. If you can do that without any of that, that's just as valid as using any of that, as applying any of that towards it. It's whatever movement in mind syncs you up with what it would be like for that to be totally manifested out for you right now. I need change no man. I sanctify myself, and in so doing, I sanctify others. To the pure, all things are pure. There is nothing unclean of itself, but to him that esteemeth anything to be unclean, to him it is unclean. There is nothing in itself unclean, but you, by your concept of self, see things either clean or unthing, or clean or unclean. This is talking about moral judgments here. So, in other words, you are the one, like if you have, and everybody does have a personal morality, or at least preferences. And that's just your creation. Those are decisions you're making. If it exists, even the most horrible thing you can think of, it still is a pure creation to God. And that's also a big struggle that even I still have when it comes to the non-dualist perspective. So this infinite ocean of golden liquid light that animates the world, animates the most joyous moment of your life, the same as the most grievous moment of your life. The same infinite love is animating both of those, which is why the concept of divine love is really not something that makes human sense, because it's nothing like any human idea of love. It will equally animate both of those things and be so possessive of it that it holds the animation in place for as long as you want it to be held in place. I and my Father are one. If I do not the works of my Father, believe me not. But if I do, though ye believe me not, believe the works, that ye may know and believe that the Father is in me, and I in him. He made himself one with God, and though it is not strange or robbery to do the works of God. And thought. He made himself one with God, and thought it not strange or robbery to do the works of God. You always bear fruit in harmony with what you are. It is the most natural thing in the world for a pear tree to bear pears, an apple tree to bear apples, and for man to mold the circumstances of his life in harmony with his inner nature. I don't know if he's going to bring up the mustard seed thing here. I don't know. I've told y'all about the mustard seed thing before. Basically, the whole you need only the faith of a mustard seed to move mountains. That doesn't mean a small amount of faith. That means complete faith. That means if you want to manifest wealth, you must totally believe in your wealth, in your possession of wealth. If you want to manifest a marriage, you must totally believe yourself to be married now. If there is some little doubt in you that, maybe they won't marry me, or, maybe I'll never, we'll never get to that phase in our relationship, or something dramatic, like maybe they'll die first or whatever, then that will hold you out of that state and hold you out of that experience. Unless you have such a dominant, belief that overpowers that. And so that mustard seed thing is talking about a completeness of faith, not a tiny amount of faith. I am the vine, ye are the branches. A branch has no life, save it be rooted in the vine. All I need to do to change the fruit is to change the vine. You have no life in my world, save that I am conscious of you. You are rooted in me, and like fruit you bear witness of the vine that I am. There is no reality in the world other than your consciousness. Now this is dramatic because this has this solipsistic undercurrent to it, and it's something interesting to contemplate. But as a former friend told me once, that if you can apply these teachings properly, to have people treat you the way you prefer to be treated, and to have them experience the things that they tell you they prefer to experience, what does it really matter? Like, it's fairly academic, and it's not necessarily something that we as humans need to understand. So, if your friend tells you that, they're in ill health, they wish they were well, and of course they truly wish they were well, and you see that for them and they experience it, that's all that matters. It doesn't even really matter if they actually have a tumor or not. You know what I'm saying? It only matters that you made the movement in mind and they had their result. You can spend time thinking about those things. I do, especially since I saw the thing about, the infinite dust that everything's an animation of. But the application and then the experience, like having that experience of resurrecting these things in your world after you've crucified them in your mind, is far more important than the mystical physics of how it really works. Like, that's something that the Father within you completely understands, and it's not necessarily something that you as this human manifestation need to understand in order to make it work. It's like when you turn on the light in your house, do you need to understand a textbook on electricity first? No, and it doesn't matter to you. What matters to you is you hit the switch and the light's on, right? Do you need to understand the internet in order to enjoy its use? No. You just need to know what site you want to go to and, what things to click on that page in order to get where you want to go on the internet. You don't need to spend 15 years learning computer science and learning networking and becoming a sysadmin or development ops type person in order to use the internet and enjoy it, right? It's the same with this. You don't need to know if that person actually exists or not. I mean, they do exist. They exist in eternity, right? We all exist in eternity. We're all animations of the same one consciousness, okay? So does it matter, right? Like, let's say you're someone who's estranged from another person, whether it's a family member, a friend, or a lover, whatever, or a child even. If you have a kid that hasn't talked to you in a while. Does it actually matter if they're somewhere out there right now not talking to you, or if they're only something within that you project outwards? And for a long time you have, for whatever reason, decided and persistently decided not to project them in your immediate vicinity. Like, what is that difference there? I mean, to your experience, you're not experiencing them right now, and that's the cause of your pain. But if you so firmly believed and identified with being with them physically again that it then expressed, that's really all that matters to you. That time apart was painful, but ultimately what you want is to share that space with them again. And you can't do that as long as you're constantly imagining them being elsewhere, wanting nothing to do with you. You're creating your own perpetual experience of that pain, when instead you could imagine them here and now and strongly identify with that such that it expressed. Okay. Although you may now seem to be what you do not want to be, all you need do to change it and to prove the change by circumstances in your world is to quietly assume that you are that which you now want to be. And in a way you do not know, you will become it. It is an important little point here. Neville is letting you know that your unfolding will most likely be totally unpredictable to you. Now, I will challenge this and say you can decide the details of your unfolding if you want. That is not at all something you're dispermitted to do. However, keep in mind that you have to be in a state where that unfolding is going to happen to you, where you're allowing that in your body of belief. So, if you want to shift realities into a preferred reality, you have to believe that that's possible. Not only possible, but that that's something that you can and will do. And then beyond that, to believe that's something that you have done. If you want to do incredible things like teleport, you have to first assume that that's possible and that you can do that, right? Or even if it's just a amount of money that's large for you and you want to come across it in a fairly easy way, you have to have other really good assumptions about money in order for that to happen to you. One thing I notice is the only reason a lot of people want to manifest winning the lottery is because they have crappy assumptions about money. Is because they think that it's so hard and there are so few ways to become wealthy, that the only way that they could possibly become wealthy is by winning a game of chance when the odds are so stacked against you that it's something like you're 10 times more likely to get struck by lightning than win the lottery. Man, when it comes to money, your thing is I want to win the lottery, you really should just adjust your money assumptions the tiniest amount and you will not need to win the lottery anymore. That's just, you've so limited your concept of self in regards to money that you've put it into that context, and that unfolding is going to be a pretty rough one for you, because then you have to lay down all these other assumptions about being a person who has won the lottery, who defied all those odds. It's a lot easier to just assume that money's easy for you to make. It really is. Now, anyway, there's another little aside there. That's probably why I'm not getting to a lecture. I'm getting into all these little things. There is no other way to change this world than by assumption. I am the way. My I amness, my consciousness, is the way by which I change my world. As I change my concept of self, I change my world. When men and women help or hinder us, they only play the part that we, by our concept of self, wrote for them, and they play it automatically. Automatically. They must play the parts they are playing because we are what we are. You will change the world only when you become the embodiment of that which you want the world to be. You have but one gift in this world that is truly yours to give, and that is yourself. Unless you yourself are that which you want to be, that which you want the world to be, you will never see it in this world. Except ye believe not that I am he, ye shall die in your sins. Do you know that no two in this room live in the same world? We are going home to different worlds tonight. We close our doors on entirely different worlds. We rise tomorrow and go to work where we meet each other and meet others, but we live in different mental worlds, different physical worlds. I can only give what I am. I have no other gift to give. This is a good reference to, I guess it might have been in lesson 1. We talked about King Judah. It's when I had Daphne on the stream. That was the only gift he could give, was himself. If I want the world to be perfect, and who does not, I have failed only because I did not know that I could never see it perfect until I myself become perfect. If I am not perfect, I cannot see perfection. But the day that I become it, I beautify my world because I see it through my own eyes. Unto the pure, all things are pure. No two here can tell me that you have heard the same message any one night. The one thing that you must do is hear what I say through that which you are. It must be filtered through your prejudices, your superstitions, and your concept of self. Whatever you are, it must come through that and be colored by what you are. This is why it's really great to reread lectures, because your current body of beliefs and what you're looking to manifest at the time, what you have manifested already, other experiences you've had, those are all going to be conditioning how you experience the lecture and what you get out of it. And it applies to anything. Look, watch a movie now that you haven't seen since you were a kid. You're going to see that movie totally differently than you saw it when you were a kid. And as it applies to this, where you're extracting information you need, right, to help you live, best embody that which you want to be, rereading the lectures is so critical. And you can apply it to any other pursuit you have. Let's say you're involved in some sort of, you're designing a physical object. You're a sort of inventor or designer of some sort. Well, there might be a book you read a lot for technical information, and when you're in a particularly inspired, lit up mood, you find the answer in the book that you haven't found for a year now. But when you're in that certain mood where you're just like, yeah, I'm feeling it, I know the solution is within me, you reread a paragraph you've read probably 20 times and you're like, whoa, how didn't I see that before? And it's just, you were just blind to it because your self-concept was filtering it out. It's the same, it's the total same with these lectures where, you've been given the answer a million times. And before Neville, you were given it in a million other ways. But depending on the state you were in, you didn't see the answer. You didn't recognize the answer. It's very interesting when you talk to people who are also aware of the law, practicing the law, your assumptions about them and the state they're in, the state they present to you as being in, are also going to very distinctly color how well they understand what you tell them. It's very, very interesting, and it can sometimes get a little bit dizzying because someone who in one moment clearly understood it, an hour later when you're talking says something that reflects that, oh, right now they don't get it. And you point it out, they still don't get it, but then you talk to them again tomorrow and they get it. They suddenly, I suddenly realized last night. He's like, yeah, I told you that 3 times. It's kind of funny. If you are disturbed and you would like me to be something other than what I appear to be, then you must be that which you want me to be. We become the thing that we want others to be, or we will never see them be it. I mean, I can see how a lot of people would misconstrue this to think that it must be an exact mirror, okay? In other words, if you want a person to be attentive to you, you must be equally as attentive to them. When simply it is, you must fully assume that they are attentive. You must really see that as a concept of them. You must be the one that beholds this attentiveness in them. That is really what he's saying there. Now, there's a mirror effect going on anyway, right? Your consciousness, my consciousness, is the only true foundation in the world. This is that which is called Peter in the Bible, not a man, this faithfulness that cannot turn to anyone, that cannot be flattered when you are told by men, you are John come again. That is very flattering to be told you are John the Baptist come again, or the great prophet Elias or Jeremiah. Then I deafened my ears to this very flattering little bit of news men would give me, and I asked myself, but honestly, who am I? If I can deny the limitations of my birth, my environment, and my belief that I am but an extension of my family tree, and feel within myself that I am Christ, and sustain this assumption until it takes a central place and forms the habitual center of my energy, I will do the works attributed to Jesus. Without thought or effort, I will mold a world in harmony with that perfection, which I have assumed and feel springing within me. When I open the eyes of the blind, unstop the ears of the deaf, give joy for mourning and beauty for ashes, then and only then have I truly established this deep vine within. That is what I would automatically do were I truly conscious of being Christ. It is said of this presence, he proved that he was Christ by his works. Our ordinary alterations of consciousness as we pass from one state to another are not transformations, your little moods, because each of them is so rapidly succeeded by another in the reverse direction. But whenever our assumption grows so stable as to definitely expel its rivals, then that central habitual concept defines our character and is a true transformation. This is also the answer to why, if it's something you really want and have imagined for quite a while, possibly why you haven't encountered it yet. Because I know a lot of people have this pattern, I've had it too, where you imagine it, and as soon as your imaginal act is done, you immediately think 50 contrary thoughts. You immediately identify with the current reality instead of remaining identified with that which you imagined. And this thing, whenever our assumption grows so stable as to definitely expel its rivals, that's just the power of doing it again and again and again and again until it becomes the dominant thought, the dominant sense of self. And you will know if it's this true transformation or not by your reactions to the exterior world. I've covered that before. There's a really great Neville quote about it. And by your internal reactions, not your external reactions. I think unfortunately I talked about this on the birthday stream. So let's say, I think the example I gave at the time was in the context of a relationship. You have assumed harmony in yourself and in all of your relationships, but you have a fight with someone, you have some form of conflict, they do something you don't like, and let's say in the moment you are totally stoned, you don't react to it in any sort of overly emotional language or whatever. Like you're just sort of like, okay, but in your mind you start fighting with them. It hasn't been a true change of self. You really haven't moved into that state of harmony. You are still, combative, and it will be reflected in the relationship. So yeah, I hope that's probably not the best example I could give. I think I had a better one about. I know a lot of people, because they really really like getting text messages and stuff nowadays. If someone doesn't reply to them in a certain expected amount of time, like let's say it is a relationship where you would be texting back and forth a lot, and that's something you desire in the relationship, and you have assumed, oh, they text me all the time, they always get back to me right away, and you send them a text and they don't text you back for what you feel is an inappropriately long amount of time. For one person, that might be 20 minutes. For another person, it might be 10 hours. For some other person, it might be 10 days, depending on the relationship and what you expect out of it. And so when that happens, what are you saying mentally? Are you saying, oh, well, I guess they don't want anything to do with me after 20 minutes? Or are you saying, oh, they're just busy, they'll get back to me when they can? Or you don't even notice that they didn't text you back in a certain amount of time. That reaction, or even more extreme, they don't text you back in 20 minutes and you spam them 5 more texts trying to get their attention. If you're doing that, you really haven't stepped into the constant contact, constant reliable contact that you prefer. You're still very much in the old state. Jesus, or enlightened reason, saw nothing unclean in the woman taken in adultery. He said to her, hath no man condemned thee? She said, No man, Lord. And Jesus said unto her, Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. No matter what is brought before the presence of beauty, it sees only beauty. Jesus was so completely identified with the lovely that he was incapable of seeing the unlovely. When you and I really become conscious of being Christ, we too will straighten the arms of the withered and resurrect the dead hopes of men. We will do all the things that we could not do when we felt ourselves limited by our family tree. It is a bold step and should not be taken lightly, because to do it is to die. John, the man of 3 dimensions, is beheaded, or loses his 3-dimensional focus that Jesus, the 4th dimensional self, may live, in reference to John the Baptist, who was the prophet that a lot of people were interested in before Jesus came along. John also, interestingly, as a name, means a beloved and is one of the disciples. Any enlargement of our concept of self involves a somewhat painful parting with strongly rooted hereditary conceptions. The ligaments are strong that hold us in the womb of conventional limitations. All that you formerly believed, you no longer believe. You know that there is no power outside of your own consciousness. Therefore, you cannot turn to anyone outside of self. You have no ears for the suggestion that something else has power in it. You know the only reality is God, and God is your own consciousness. There is no other God. Therefore, on this rock you build the everlasting church, and boldly assume you are this divine being, self-begotten because you dare to appropriate that which was not given to you in your cradle, a concept of self not formed in your mother's womb, a concept of self outside of the offices of man. The story is beautifully told us in the Bible using the 2 sons of Abraham. One, the blessed Isaac, born outside of the offices of man, and the other, Ishmael, born in bondage. Sarah was much too old to beget a child, and her husband Abraham went in unto the bondservant Hagar, the pilgrim, and she conceived of the old man, and bore him a son called Ishmael. Ishmael's hand was against every man, and every man's hand against him. Every child born of woman is born into bondage, born into all that his environment represents, regardless of whether it be the throne of England, the White House, or any great place in the world. Every child born of woman is personified as this Ishmael, the child of Hagar. But asleep in every child is the blessed Isaac, who is born outside of the offices of man, and is born through faith alone. The second child has no earthly father. He is self-begotten. What is the second birth? I find myself man. I cannot go back to my mother's womb, and yet I must be born a second time. Except a man be born again, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. This is in reference to one of the visions of the promise, where you are born out of your own skull. But it's also talking about remembering the law and applying it so regularly that it becomes your new embodiment. It becomes your new concept of self. Also, I'm pretty sure this is the Isaac who is the father of Jacob and Esau. If anyone has read any other Neville or listened to any of my other streams, you will know the Jacob and Esau story, that this is when Isaac is older, he's blind, and he's deciding who he's basically going to give all his shit to. And he tells Esau to go out and hunt and come back, and he'll give him the blessing. And what Jacob does, because he's not supposed to receive the blessing, he's not the firstborn son, he goes out, slaughters, I think it's a sheep. He slaughters something, like the sheep of their flock, puts on its skin because Esau was hairy. And so he goes in wearing this sheepskin, and Isaac says, "Come close, son, that I may feel you," which is a reference to when you're imagining, you're feeling that this is the reality. And he feels this skin, and it says, "You're hairy, so you must be Esau. I'm going to give you the blessing." As soon as he gives the blessing, Esau comes in like, whoa, what the fuck is going on here? I'm done the hunt. Where's my blessing? He's like, well, who's this? This is Jacob. And Jacob, the name means supplanter. It's the one who receives the blessing. And he received it through trickery. And When you imagine, that's what you're doing. You're tricking your inner Isaac into believing that what you're imagining is real right now. And therefore, you're giving it the right of birth. You're giving it the birthright blessing of inheriting your reality, of becoming your new world. I quietly appropriated that which no man can give me, no woman can give me. I dare to assume that I am God. This must be of faith, this must be of promise. Then I become the blessed, I become Isaac. As I begin to do the things that only this presence could do, I know that I am born out of the limitations of Ishmael, and I have become heir to the kingdom. Ishmael could not inherit anything, although his father was Abraham of God. Ishmael did not have both parents of the godly. His mother was Hagar the bondwoman, so he could not partake of his father's estate. You are Abraham and Sarah, and contained within your own consciousness there is one waiting for recognition. In the Old Testament it is called Isaac, and in the New Testament it is called Jesus, and it is born without the aid of man. It's also considered Joshua, and it's also considered Jacob, because it's all you. It's all movements of mind within you. No man can tell you that you are Christ Jesus. No man can tell you and convince you that you are God. But I will say it as the slogan at the top of every stream. You must toy with the idea and wonder what it would be like to be God. No clear conception of the origin of phenomena is possible, except that consciousness is all, and all is consciousness. Nothing can be evolved from man that was not potentially involved in his nature. The ideal we serve and hope to attain could never be evolved from us were it not potentially involved in our nature. In other words, if you can think about it, it's possible to experience it. Let me now retell and emphasize an experience of mine printed by me 2 years ago. After this, we're going to wrap it up. Printed by me 2 years ago under the title The Search. I think it will help you to understand this law of consciousness and show you that you have no one to change but self, for you are incapable of seeing other than the contents of your own consciousness. Once, in an idle interval at sea, I meditated on the perfect state, and wondered what I would be were I of two pure eyes to behold iniquity, if to me all things were pure, and were I without condemnation. As I became lost in this fiery brooding, I found myself lifted above the dark environment of the senses. So intense was feeling, I felt myself a being of fire, dwelling in a body of air. Voices as from a heavenly chorus, with the exaltation of those who had been conquerors in a conflict with death, were singing, "He is risen, he is risen," and intuitively I knew they meant me. Then I seemed to be walking in the night. I soon came upon a scene that might have been the ancient pool of Bethesda, which is a place for healing, for in this place lay a great multitude of impotent folk, blind, halt, withered, waiting not for the moving of the water as of tradition, but waiting for me. As I came near, without thought or effort on my part, they were one after the other molded as by the magician of the beautiful. Eyes, hand, feet, all missing members were drawn from some invisible reservoir and molded in harmony with that perfection which I felt springing within me. When all were made perfect, the chorus exulted, "It is finished." I know this vision was the result of my intense meditation upon the idea of perfection, for my meditations invariably bring about the union with the state contemplated. I have been so completely absorbed within the idea that for a while I had become what I contemplated, and the high purpose with which I had for that moment identified myself drew the companionship of high things, and fashioned the vision in harmony with my inner nature. The ideal with which we are united by association of ideas to awaken 1,000 moods to create a drama in keeping with the central idea. Okay, let me reread that. The ideal with which we are united works by association of ideas to awaken 1,000 moods to create a drama in keeping with the central idea. In other words, there is this, to go back to sort of the tree metaphor, that tree is going to bear fruit in of its nature. So if you're in a state of being highly respected, you're going to have a whole bunch of experiences that only a person who is highly respected will have. And if that state is also affiliated, say, with one of fame, you might have experiences of just going to a restaurant and the waiter knows who you are and they give you the best table. And that's only an experience, and it's an automatic experience. It's not something you specifically imagine for, but it's in that body of belief of, I am well known and highly respected, and so you have that experience. In other words, there's going to be a bunch of smaller manifestations that you don't necessarily imagine for, but they're with this body of belief. They're with this mindset. They're with this ideal state that you've identified with. So if you identify with this state of, let's pick a state that is unwanted for most people. You identify with always being broke. As soon as you get a little bit ahead, something's going to break that needs to be replaced. And it's just automatic. Or you're going to notice that a bill that's normally around $100 is suddenly $150. For a reason that when you call them on the phone and you're on the phone with them for 2 hours, they still can't justify it to you, but they want the money. Because you're in this state of being broke all the time. Similarly, if you're in a state of wealth, you might have experiences where, gee, I totally forgot that this guy owed us 20 grand and he finally paid it. I mean, look, there are people who are in that incredible state of wealth where they have millions and their business might involve services, for which they bill regularly fairly large amounts of money. They might bill $20,000 to $100,000 for any given job, right? And they might have forgot that this guy never paid us. And then, one day they're talking to an accountant like, oh, that guy finally paid us. Really? 20K? And 8K of that's mine, based on however much of the business is owned by you. Yeah, those things can happen when you're in that state of wealth, right? So just what he's talking about there is whatever state you identify with will have automatic manifestations. My mystical experiences have convinced me that there is no way to bring about the perfection we seek other than by the transformation of ourselves. As soon as we succeed in transforming ourselves, the world will melt magically before our eyes and reshape itself in harmony with that which our transformation affirms. This is interesting because Neville is talking here about depending on how you experience it, an instant manifestation, but the idea that the exterior world can reflect your new state immediately. It doesn't have to be tomorrow or a week from now or 2 months from now. It can be, boom, instant. We fashion the world that surrounds us by the intensity of our imagination and feeling, and we illuminate or darken our lives by the concepts we hold of ourselves. Nothing is more important to us than our conception of ourselves, and especially is true of our concept of the deep, dimensionally greater one within us. What he's talking about there is, what assumptions do you have about manifesting? What beliefs do you have about God? What beliefs do you have about imagination? What beliefs do you have about the power of that? Do you think it's limited? Do you think that there are some things that you can manifest and other things you can't? Do you think that only things in your personal life are your manifestations? These are all components of our concept of self, right? I think on that's where we're going to end it, because